All right, let's head over to the cloud and let's pick up our weekly Landman review. We've got Warren Martin on the line with us here. And Warren, I think we have officially evolved into a Siskel and Ebert type of a role because Landman has become more about pop culture and storylines within the family dialogue than the oil industry. The oil industry now has become B roll, kind of an afterthought a little bit, but the bigger picture here is it's still an oil and gas show. It's still about oil and gas. And even though there's probably less than 3 minutes of oil and gas dialogue at the end of the day because it brings out the family, that's really what's happening here, in my opinion, Warren. Latest episode of Landman. What's your overview thoughts? By the way, episode 6. By the way, I forgot to mention that episode 6. How you doing? And where's your mind at with this episode?
Yeah, Jason, great to be with you today. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that, compared to last season, every single episode, you and I were really getting into what happens in the oil field, the way that pipes move, the way that a well's drilled, the way that, we really talked a lot about what happens in the oil and gas industry. It really, in this season, all we've talked about is money. When it comes to oil and gas, we've talked about deals of money. We haven't talked about the actual functioning. The crews have not really been a big part of this. And even in this episode, they were only a part of it to say that's the future without us. And I think that that's what we're seeing happen in Landman is we're seeing the future of the show without the oil and gas industry being the central part of the show. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that, it's still going to have a dynamic impact on how people see the industry.
As long as you mention that the future part where they go to the trade show down in the Permian Basin, and that was great because trade shows are an integral part. I think it's starting to change now a little bit after the infusion of the nonprofits, the NGOs, and the PPPs, because part of their business model was to either be a high participant in one of those trade shows or do their own. And so essence become competition within the industry. And there's only so much cannibalizing that can be done. And so I think we're going to see a shift in the trade shows. And I thought it was interesting because, the one guy, he goes in there like 90% of the trade show people, they're just window shopping. They're there for the free hot sauce. They're there for the swag that's worth about 10 to 20 bucks a piece. Because if the oil and gas industry deserves credit for one thing, it's having the best swag on the planet. You will not go to any other trade show and receive the swag like you do. Man, when I was doing the kids' stuff up in the Bakken and I brought them to the trade show, that's all they talked about the whole way home. They went through the bag of swag like it was Halloween on a 3-hour drive back to Fargo, talking about, oh, look at this from Baker Hughes, look at this from Continental. And it was just fantastic because it's a Swiss Army knife. It's not little Hershey Kisses and pens. No, no, no. Oh, no, it's like a big 5-pound Hershey Kiss, for crying out loud. But your swag comment, because the swag is such an integral part. I mean, I've got my Sunrise oil field supply hat I wear because it's orange.
Yeah.
In certain parts of the country, you got to wear orange, otherwise you're going to get shot. And so that's swag right there. Integral part of my life. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what Kansas Strong. That's one of the big things that we're built on. We're actually seen as the booth that you want to skip at a trade show because our mission is outward focused. We really focus on the public. We do go to those trade shows that are relevant to our region. So we go to like the Oklahoma City Expo, which is the biggest one around here. We go to the Cayugas, the Ecogas, the smaller ones that are here in Kansas. But at those trade shows, we give away minimal swag. And so people are like, Kansas Strong, they don't give away anything, because people do at oil industry events. They give away great swag. That's how you build connections. That's how you get people to notice you. And we take that philosophy, and when we go to a regular job show where everybody else is handing out a pin, and we're handing out really great swag at ours, and people are like, "Oh man, Kansas Strong, that's the booth you want to go to." We give away T-shirts. We give away, and they're not cheap T-shirts. I mean, we're giving away T-shirts that are $15 to $20 a pop to people. And so we're really known for our swag outside of the oil industry. But the companies that work within the oil industry, they do use a lot of that swag as a way to really get you to hold on to their product, just like you're holding on to that Sunrise cap. They want you to hold on to it, to wear it. They want you to remember it because they know that, the technology that they have may be something that you're not going to utilize for another year. And they want you to have something that you're going to hold on to where when you do need that type of technology, you think, oh, wait a minute, I got this sitting on my desk, or I got that shirt that I wear on a regular basis. Maybe I should give them a call. And so that is a big part of the marketing that takes place in the oil industry.
And I just put this together now, Warren, as you were talking, because, I came from ag and technology and, government affairs and, news and publishing and city magazines and the home industry. So oil and gas was literally the most distant thing from my pedigree, if you will, but I'd done everything else. And so it was an easy understanding because I was a business owner. And it was quick for me to figure out with the crude life, for example, that the oil industry, you have to do an annual, otherwise there's no point. You might get by with 6 months, but you have to do annual things because that's how they operate. They get together like October, November, December, and it might be August, September, October, whenever their last quarter is. That's when they get together to make the decisions for the next year. Mm-hmm. And then that next year, they just spend managing those decisions. Yeah, there's a little bit of discrepancy, cash for some things here and there, but you had better hope that CEO is wearing this Sunrise oil field supply cap when he goes hunting next year before he goes to the boardroom, so you have a seat at the table. And every little bit helps. Swag with purpose helps. My old buddy, who's is now a retired ad agency, he actually fired his last 3 clients by saying, "No, I'm done. I'm getting out of this world. I'm getting done." He used to call swag landfill because all that swag that you see at most of the trade shows, it doesn't even make it to the ride home, and it's in the trash. The oil and gas industry should be This should be an ESG score for the oil and gas industry. Now that I'm talking out loud here, their swag should bump them up a couple points here, for crying out loud. What do you think of that, Warren? Huh?
There you go.
Sustainable swag. We could start a whole new deal.
We could start a whole new company, Sustainable Swag. But
ladies and gentlemen, if you wanted to have some sustainable swag, talk to Warren Martin and myself, and we'll get it for you in 2026. Let's transition into something else here, unless you got any more comments on that, because we'll spend an hour.
I want to make one more comment that really it ties into what our show was, because really the conversations we did have in the show were about financial issues in the oil and gas industry. And you're exactly right. Everything happens on an annual basis in the oil industry. Even among independents, it very much falls that way. Right now, our 2026 schedule, we already know every conference we're going to go to, what the dates are. It's already on the books. We already know what we're going to do at those conferences. If you want to make a 2026 sale, then you had to make it in 2025 to get it in the budget, especially when larger companies, if you're not in the budget already for 2026, you're now working for a 2027 sale. And so that you're exactly right on that.
So let's finish up here at the trade show. Swag is probably number one in the nation. I've never been to a Department of Defense only trade show, although I have gotten some swag from them. So I will put that caveat that they may have something that rivals the oil and gas industry. Now, the other part is the future. You mentioned this, and I wanted to save this to the last, but let's go ahead and put it to the front because it was mentioned and the show is completely organic. I got a few ways to go on this, Warren, but I thought there was going to be more from the trade show. We had the sex appeal of the girls with Lucas Oil. That must have been a heck of a product placement, and for them to accept that role, that's pretty impressive, because that was not a positive for those girls. That was
Right.
a negative for those girls. That was another social commentary saying that the pinup girl in the garage days are over. And the gentleman who said, "No, I don't want my wife to see this on Instagram," that was it right there. That summed it up for 90% of the working class, while the other 10% glorifies it on social media. That was my takeaway from that, Warren. How about you?
Yeah, I think that that's also a huge difference that you'll see at the oil industry, at the expos and the events that are taking place. Uh, you know, let's be honest. Advertising, it's a form of advertising. Sex sells in advertising, always has, always will. But the oil industry is different. I have not been to an expo that has ever had. Of course, I don't go to some of the major ones in Houston and Dallas and the Permian. I go to the ones regionally around here where they have a set of girls that are just standing there just for eye candy, just to have their picture taken. However, in sales, you do find a lot of beautiful women that are representing those roles. It's common knowledge that if you're going to run a booth, then it's where it's going to be a male-dominated audience. You put a pretty woman in there. The oil industry is different because while there are a tremendous number of beautiful women that are in those booths, they have to know what they're talking about. They're not just eye candy that's in those booths. They're actually extremely cognizant of the industry. They understand their job. They understand their role. And I was kind of disappointed in the way that they portrayed this a little bit because the women that I have met at trade shows are extremely knowledgeable about the industry and the products that they're selling and how they can benefit someone from buying from them. They are salespeople, and salespeople, that was not the way they were portrayed in the show this episode.
What I'll say from going to trade shows for the last 25 years and covering them from the media standpoint is that 15 years ago, you saw a lot more of that. In fact, you could go, and when you became friends with them on social media, you saw that, oh, this was a former cheerleader for an NFL team. Well, that makes sense. You might as well, I mean, if you're going to have some beautiful women out there representing your company, you might as well pick from the best if you're down in Houston, if you're down in Dallas, if you're down in different places. So, that part I understood because that was a public relations job. And so what happened is as the oil companies became a little bit more efficient, they had to shed some of those public relations dollars and integrate public relations with sales and marketing. And so then what you started seeing is more of what Warren's talking about, is that there were still some very beautiful women, but they knew what they were talking about. They weren't just there for the social media pick. Now, those still exist. There's still a handful of companies at every trade show that still have some public relations. I call it the pinup girl car classic thing from the old 70s shows and 80s shows. Where the guy's signing up for the car and asking the girl, "Do you come with the car?" That type of thing. And that's fine and everything. But I took that as kind of, this was more of a sunset for that vibe at trade shows, that going forward, you're probably not going to really see that as much. And I've seen the trend just decline down, especially in the oil and gas industry. It's common in the home industry too, with builders and contractors. When you're getting into the very industry where most contractors and masons and drywallers are men too. And so you'll see that same formula of public relations, if you will, because it is a job, Warren. At the end of the day, eye candy is a job. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to observe, right? So let's go to the future. Go ahead. Any final comments on what I was just saying?
Well, you're speaking like someone who's done that job for a number of years. I mean, it's obvious from this right here that you are the eye candy for this show.
As disheveled as I look today, and as much as I look like a turtle, you bet, man. Well, I appreciate that, but let's get to the meat and bones of the episode. There's two things specifically that I want to cover. One is the future, and the other one is that the cartel is now running oil companies. They slid that one right past the goalie. I don't know if you caught
Yep.
that or Warren or not, but that's a teaser, folks. So I gotta be honest. When they showed those roustabouts and rig crews that were automated, you had the one guy who was there window shopping who saw through the BS real quick that, oh, so this is going to replace my job. He's like the Walmart person working the self-serve cashier line. He figured it out that, oh, I'm training the customers to do my job. Well, that's stupid. So he took his hot sauce and went. And then the other side was the people that had the revelation that, okay, we got to figure out our present, not even our future, man, because the future is here right before our eyes. And I got to be honest, Warren, this is the same exact formula. Coal went down. Coal went down the same thing where they had 30 men mining a mountain, and now all of a sudden it's six, and it's all AI and robotics. And the regulations went down the same exact path. So I actually wrote down the future is coal for oil and gas. But what was your takeaway on the AI and the robotics and the work crews being taken out? And I would imagine the independent businesses that you represent, that machine represents them as well, huh?
I completely disagree with that.
Okay, good.
I think you saw the two different sides of the oil industry represented in the two different interactions you had. You had the geologist that took the hot sauce and left. I think that pretty much represents the independent viewpoint of it. Then you had the roustabouts that are working for, let's be honest, they're portraying MTEX as a major oil company. They call it an independent, but they're portraying, excuse me,
Excuse you.
they're portraying it as a major oil company. So when you're talking about the majors, yes, I think the majors are very much looking, but you're talking about majors that are drilling wells that are producing thousands of barrels a day, tens of thousands of barrels in some cases. Yes, it makes sense. That type of automation would make sense to utilize. When you're talking about the independents, especially those here in Kansas, you look at that and you're going to have to raise twice as much money to drill a well to be able to use that machine, because the cost of that machine is going to be up front on the drilling process and is going to double the cost of drilling a well here in Kansas. We're utilizing drilling equipment that's been around for 40, 50 years. Here, we had a cable drilling rig that I run when I was the executive director at the Kansas Oil Museum. We had a cable drilling rig that was still in operation in the 1990s out here in Kansas. And so, when you're talking about wells like they're talking about that are $6 million a pop, $2 million a pop to drill, yes, that automation potentially is the future that could replace a large number of people in the oil industry. When you're talking about wells here in Kansas that are $250,000 to $500,000 to drill, that type of automation is just cost prohibitive to even consider. So I think you kind of see a divergence between the smaller producers, the independents, and the major oil companies. And yes, I agree with you. I think technology and the major oil companies, they're headed the way of coal, where they're going to innovate, roboticize, use as much technology as they can to replace people, because that minimizes your liability tremendously. And then on the other side, on the independents, it's just completely inconceivable at this point, especially with the price of oil being where it's at right now. It would double the cost of drilling a well out here.
That's interesting. I've never thought of it from that perspective because, the coal industry really didn't have a whole bunch of independence. The coal
Right.
industry was very, very managed co-ops and corporations and power companies, if you will. And so it was just very, very risk detailed in terms of managed. So when you talk about the oil industry, you could see theoretically, if the free market does exist at all, a little bit of a renaissance happening for some of these independent producers, because as the corporations try to go the way of coal, a lot of it guided by government subsidies and regulations, um, they, there is going to be an open market. I mean, there really is. Whereas coal was a whole different deal. Yeah, there might be some similarities, but yeah, there is some opportunity there, Warren. There really is. I never thought of it from that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, one of the primary markets that you see here when it comes to equipment sales, one of the primary markets you see here when it comes to equipment sales is equipment sales that are from the Permian Basin. A lot of our equipment, pump jacks, drilling rigs, different things like that, were previously employed in the Permian Basin area down in Texas somewhere. And as they are replaced down in Texas, that technology makes its way up to the smaller independents that are up here in this region of the world, or from Oklahoma. When they're sold from Oklahoma from the major oil companies, then they come up here on a secondhand market. And so a lot of our equipment, that's where it comes. That's the channels. Not all of it, but a lot of it, that's the channels it comes through. So you really see technology that moves into those smaller markets. That technology is the secondhand technology because it's being replaced by something else in the major markets. And so I think that that's really kind of that differentiation between us and coal.
And what you're describing is the trickle down economics, and it used to work very well until the digital world came in and sped up everything so much to where the physical world couldn't keep up with the digital world. And so you have these issues where the regulations get so over the top, and people are sensitized by the word regulations to death now, to where it's almost an eye roll type of a thing. And so if you try to have a serious conversation about it, it gets a little bit difficult. But there is, it's kind of like when aviation became very affordable, you saw a speed up in the economy because, from an oil and gas perspective, these CEOs could actually fly to different shale plays in different days. I mean, in the same days, whereas before that would be the week. And Warren, you know as well as I do that so many of these initial deals in the oil and gas industry, a lot of the old school people, they have to actually stand on the land. They have to actually take a look at what's there and see, okay, can I bring the crew in? And, like Billy Bob Thornton, getting back to Landman, he's the kind of guy that would have to actually take a look at where they're drilling beforehand because of all the little incidentals and rocks in the middle of nowhere, that type of thing that maybe the data can't pick up. Am I wrong on that, or is there still old school people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially here in this region, there's very much. I'm going to see the land. I want to walk the land. I want to, I want to. We even saw that in this episode. That's where you had the H2S incident take place. Why did we have the H2S incident taking place? Is because Tommy wanted to take over this lease. So what did he do? He sent his crew out to go walk the lease, to go take a look at it. I would say here in Kansas, that would be the owner of the company that would be out there walking that lease, looking at the liability concerns, looking about the issues, the equipment that they have, what needs to be replaced, what doesn't need to be replaced, all of that. And so I think that is very relevant to how oil is continually done, especially among independents.
So the other part of the episode that really concerns me, if I'm an oil and gas professional, is that they're educating the public as we go here. And so whatever Landman does with the education at the end, that's what the mainstream is going to believe. And so when you have an attorney asking for someone to educate them, the public is going to go along with that journey. And Tommy saying, explain to me how this shell game works. The public is going to go along with that education process. And so it's interesting to me how a lot of this is becoming a new educational oil and gas show. in many aspects, and it's really becoming more of a drama than anything documentary. Uh, but there is some realities with how certain milestones are done, and I wanted to go to the lawyer talk. It's the lawyer, the fix it, and then the science. That kind of seems to be the triangle there. You have the lawyer, and then the fix it people, and then the science, how they're trying to explain everything here. And there's this old guard experience versus the in the moment altruism that's happening. So, what was your take on all the lawyer talk that was going back and forth? Because honestly, that was like the only oil and gas part of the show, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was that and the deal that Tommy had to make because Cammy forced him to sign the papers,
Yeah, that was
and
more banking, though. That was
yeah,
more
it's more
banking.
banking. Yeah, but yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the lawyer says, I need an education. I need an education from a scientist. Well, I watched the entire show and I saw that she got an education, but it wasn't in drilling for oil. It was more in a relationship than anything else. But the reality is the oil industry is very much keyed upon people who are successful, and the only thing that we got about science was is that Neil or Nate, whichever one whatever team you're on there, the Neil or the Nate team, whatever you want to call him, he says this is the guy you need to talk to. He's the best that's out there. Off of that one recommendation, it was really interesting to me that she doesn't want him to explain to her what needs to happen. She wants to hear it from a scientist, and she goes out and meets with him. He never really explains what needs to happen in any real detail, but then she gives him the job to run the entire operation. So in the same kind of double scene there, back-to-back scenes there, you have her one dismissing him, the lead, who is supposed to be the lead attorney, dismissing him in his opinions, but then giving the job to her now boyfriend based off of his recommendation that he's the best. So it's kind of an interesting interplay that's taking place there, where she's trying to run the company, the legal side of the company, but at the same time, she took his recommendation.
I think she's probably one of the more dangerous characters right now because she's playing both sides for her benefit.
Yep.
And she's using her position of power in order for benefit. And when she gets held accountable, she uses altruism and the greater good to fling at Nate or whoever. I forget the Australian's geologist's name. Never trust an Australian. They're drunks. And so it's one of the greatest lines from I think it's Schitt's Creek. I think it was. Yeah, was what it was. Uh, and I've heard that multiple times from women who date Australians too. But here she is, completely being hypocritical. Everything that she's trying to hold everybody else accountable for, she's now doing, including giving a job based on sexual preference. Yeah, he's qualified, but you also hooked up, and now you're drinking beer on the job. You're the one working. He's not. He got done explicitly telling you you are the only one working, and now you're breaking the HR. So for somebody
and to take him from drilling more traditional land-based operations to putting him on a floating platform to drill underneath the ocean, that's a whole different technological master. He may understand it, but he's never done it. And
right.
I don't know any oil company that would put that much money into something and then take someone who hasn't technically been a part of that operation before and put them in charge of it. I mean,
so
here in Kansas, they won't even hire a driller, someone to drill a well. They won't hire the driller that hasn't run a drill before. You're not going to do that here in Kansas, much less are you going to go out in the middle of the ocean on a floating platform and put someone there leading the operation to drill a well that's never done it before.
And so sticking with some of the oil field things here in this show that are somewhat reflected on realism, You know, the issues with her are very real because she took ownership into her own hands. Tommy is now the president, so he feels like he's essentially the owner. He's running the company. Cammy just inherited or took over the company after her husband's passing, so she feels like she owns it. And she actually does. But Tommy's the one running it, so it's his identity as well. And here you got this young person coming in where she, for some reason, feels that she's more powerful. Actually, I've heard this from attorneys her age before. They'll cite the CEO's name and say that CEO reports to me. So that person at that age, that 30-year-old attorney working for an oil company, she's doing a dang good job because I've seen that level of arrogance before. And my broader question to you, Warren, is that this power struggle is bizarre but real because if Cammy's going to let Tommy run the business, well, he should run the business. But Cammy can't do that, so now she's running the business, but Tommy's running the business. And then now you got some employees that are empowered enough to do what you just said, hire a geologist who has no business doing the job he's about to do. This actually is a real issue in the oil and gas company or any corporation. It's called the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And it's an interesting storyline they're playing out because they're starting at the top and then showing how the bottom is doing it too. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose, but it's happening, Warren, and it's real. And let's talk about that because that's one of oil and gas's biggest problem because they got deadlines and time is money, and sometimes you really got to trust the person. You really do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure Tommy does run the company at all anymore. And I think that's where the episodes, I mean, I think that's where this is headed. I think that'll be the point of crisis, maybe for the season finale, is does Tommy try and reassert control? But obviously he's not running the company at this point in time. Cammy told him that he's going to do this deal, so he's doing the deal. He had no say in it. We just last episode went through a whole series where Tommy chewed everybody out about how he is in charge of this company. He can't run the company if he doesn't know what's going on. So everything goes through him. Then the lawyer goes out and hires a new geologist to run a platform without talking to Tommy, without any conversation with him. She just made one of the biggest hire that you can make for that job. So I think there's a real argument to be made that Tommy doesn't run the company at all anymore at this point in time. Now, I think at some point there's going to be a point of crisis where he's going to take that back over. But right now, I don't think Tommy runs the company.
I'm having a fun time watching Andy Garcia's character because he's acting like somebody who knows more than everybody else in the room. And when Tommy gave his little speech, Billy Bob Thornton, Tommy, about how Cammy, Demi Moore, views him as a loser because Billy Bob and John Hamm, what was John Hamm's name do you remember? Anyway, the husband, sorry, John. They were partners, and one went one way, one went the other way, or something along those lines. They were a little bit ambiguous with that. They weren't very specific, if you will. And so she views him as a loser. And I think that's accurate. I think there's a lot of truth behind that. I don't necessarily think it's as dramatic as Billy Bob makes it out to be, but more as I control him. He's that much of a loser, that I own him type of a thing. But Warren, I have a little different take on that Easter egg they dropped. What was your thoughts on Billy Bob being a loser?
Well, I think we talked about that. Was it last episode? Sorry, my computer's making all kinds of noise. We talked about that last episode from the standpoint of that when Cammy was forcing him to take the deal, that that I brought up the idea that look, he was already there. He already owned his own company, and he went bust, and had to go take a job. for MTEX, and so she's already lost one company, and I think that that plays into Cammie's decision that she's going to run the company because she doesn't want him to lose this company as well. And we talked about that either last week or the week before. We talked about that, and I think that is exactly what's happening. It's what's playing out going forward here. What I picked up from the episode and what they were alluding to was the idea that they were friends. But not only were they friends, but they were friends who also both owned a company. And one of them turned it into a multi-billion-dollar operation, and the other one went bust and had to go work for his friend and become an employee. And so I think that that just, again, builds on that idea that you're not the boss anymore because you went bust, you went broke, you're a loser, and you had to come work as an employee. So don't forget your place that you're an employee.
The part that I think they're going with this, and this is the other part I wanted to write down, or I wrote down besides the future is coal as kind of the main Easter eggs, is Andy Garcia's character, Galliano, mentioned that the cartel has been looking at the oil industry for 20 years because there's less risk because it's more managed by the government so they can launder their money much easier and they can just utilize it's a safer profit center than drugs. And so that was Easter egg number one. And Easter egg number two is that the relationship of John Hamm and Billy Bob, I think John Hamm went into partnership with the cartel at that moment. So the reason that John Hamm became successful was because he got an infusion of cash, which is very common, by the way, very common for people of great success to, at one point, take the 30 pieces of silver, take the, whatever you want to call it, type of a thing, infusion, sell your soul, whatever, and it works out profit-wise. And then the person who went the honest path, well, they go the role of Job, if you will. They go the role of, the sad sack and the loser and all that different stuff. And so that's how I took that. That I think it's going to come out that Andy Garcia and John Hamm were partners, and that's how the cartel got involved with the oil land and the company and everything else. Have you thought of that yet?
Yeah, I think that you talked about Galliano and the way that he's interacting as he kind of walks in. The idea that I have is he's acting like in the old timey movies that you see of the gangsters that are in New York and the Untouchables and those types of things. He is the Godfather who walks up to a man who's down on his luck and says, "Oh, here, just take $20. No, don't worry about it. Take $20." And everybody that's watching, everybody knows that you just obligated yourself for something down the road, that you just screwed yourself in a major way at some point down the road. That's the way that he's acting in all of these scenes as, "Oh, I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to give you that. Oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. You can paper it. It's not a problem. Because in the end, I got the guns and you're going to do what I want you to do." And it keeps coming back to that. Tommy keeps reminding people, "I saw you kill someone." And he keeps, Tommy's keeping at the forefront. I know the guns are coming out at some point. And Galliano's just like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Here's a little more money. Here, let me help you out here. Come meet us for dinner. It's fine." But every step you're obligating yourself more and more to him.
It does have that Sopranos charisma, doesn't it? Just yeah, it really does. And and at the end he drops the big warning that when the sharks start coming and they smell Cammie, they're going to pounce. These aren't hyenas. These are sharks. They're totally different. Totally different. These aren't, these aren't scavengers. These are opportunists, and they strike hard and they strike fast. And so anyway, that's kind of sets up the last few episodes, I think, to where things are going to be going. But
can I interject here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I'll have to go back and watch it now, but I don't think the Sharks comment was about Cammie. I think the Sharks comment was about Tommy, that the Sharks were after Tommy.
Interesting. Okay.
And that when they smell blood in the water, he's a loser, and they're going to come after him. And I think that comment was directed towards Tommy. And I
I'll have
think
to go back and watch that
Galliano's
too.
way. I mean, Tommy's the only resistance he has to this whole thing, and I think it was Galliano's way to say, you might want to look at getting rid of Tommy.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to take a look at that.
Yeah, I'm on.
A couple other notes I had is unresolved mama issues are going to be a big storyline between Sam Elliott and Billy Bob, as well as others. It certainly seemed like, and we saw Sam Elliott get in a fight, which I thought was defending his wife's honor. That he was that old school. That hey, listen, I can say something bad about her, but you can't. You can't even say anything disrespectful. And still to his day, he's honoring that old man code, if you will, Warren. That's how I took it. What was your thought on the fight?
Yeah, first of all, if they had to do it in the stadium with the stairs there because that's the only way that that was going to be an action fight is if someone fell down the stairs. Is the only way that was going to happen. I mean, otherwise it would have looked like Clint Eastwood trying to ride a bronc at 90 years old in the movie, like in the movie that he just did not too long ago. But anyway, um, that's the only way they can make it an action role. But yes, I saw it as him defending his wife's honor. And I think it also alluded to the fact that this guy actually had a relationship with his wife. And I think that it never said that, but everything kind of pointed to it. Even Tommy's comments to him about being a whore, because she was, and he didn't balk at that. He didn't balk back at Tommy at that. So I think that it has, definitely got some issues that we're going to see play out in some different ways. Not sure where they're going. I think they're just setting the foundation that there are these family issues that are still present, even though you have TJ and Tommy riding together.
And in the intro, they showed Sam Elliott's character in the recap as kind of being that centrifugal magnetic family connection, if you will, because he sees Angela as something positive. He sees Billy Bob. He still sees everybody as, trying to do their thing. And it's bizarre that he still sees Angela as the positive because it's like they ramped up the Kardashian with her, which is very accurate still, by the way, because Diamonds Are in Dallas was a true statement. And Warren, I did want to ask you about this because this has nothing to do with the storyline. It has to do more with the oil field towns. Mm-hmm. But really, all I want to say is that I still believe that Angela's character, Emmy Award winning, and now I'll put Rebecca in there too. She's doing a phenomenal job of portraying real life characters to where you can be nauseated by them, much like Billy Zane from Titanic, where he would go out and get booed, and he's like an actor, but he'd get booed in real life. So if you're actually making people dislike you, you're doing your job. You're doing a real good job. So, but the Kardashian storyline's not my cup of tea. It's quite nauseating. What do you got for the Angela taking over the house and she's taking over the house.
Yeah, what was your question about the oilfield towns?
I'll get there, but okay. I just want you to comment on Angela before we get there.
I think that, what we're seeing is a repeat. Tommy keeps criticizing TJ for the way that his mom lived and the way that she, who she was. And he goes after TJ over and over and over and over again. And yet Angela is everything that Tommy is railing against in his mom. It's the exact same thing. They're maybe without drugs, but it's the exact same, kind of personality, kind of temperament. At the same time, you got TJ that's saying you need to remedy that situation. You need to remarry her. You need to do it quick before you lose her. And that one is not as big a deal because where TJ is at this point in life, I think where he's at is simply that being alone is worse than anything else that could happen to you in the world. So the last thing you want to be is alone. And I think that, his reasoning, that's where it comes from more than anything else.
Good analysis there. I hadn't thought of it in that side, if you will, but that's good. That's because they're trying to bring her in a positive way. But the window dressing right now is Kardashian, and Kardashian is not very well accepted by the population. However, it's still a popular show. So I'm sure that's why a lot of women are being drawn into it because diamonds are in Dallas. And I actually said something very similar to that at some economic development meetings up in the Bakken back when they were first trying to build and they were planning on that. Williston was going to be double the population in 5 years and Dickinson triple the population. Everybody had $100 oil dreams, Warren, right? It's never going to bust, never. And when it got down to the main street investments and, the cafes and the flower shops and that type of thing, when they started talking about the high-end boutiques, I said, whoa, why are you bringing in high-end boutiques in Williston and in Dickinson? The women who live there that are making the money, they fly to Dallas, they fly to Denver, they fly to Minneapolis if they're on a budget. I go, but they're not going to Williston at some downtown boutique so they can go brag to their billionaire wives' friends. No, that's not how that works. And so I kind of got ushered out of the room on that because, they wanted that high-end boutique in downtown because it helped their marketing, if you will. Forget that. It's a taxpayer expense. Okay, now I'm going to step off my soapbox there. But that's a real-life example of trying to say, listen, the way the industry operates is the women aren't going to shop for designer jeans in Watford City, Dodge City, Kansas. Maybe they will, maybe not. I don't know, but they're probably going to go to Dallas or Denver. Warren, go ahead.
No, you're exactly right. Especially, I go to Midland a couple times a year. I do run a camp down there for teenagers, and so Midland is a very different place when we're in a bus cycle versus a boom cycle. Very different place. Very different. And I think that when you see a boom cycle actually take place, you do see a massive increase in amenities. You see a massive increase in food, restaurants. You see a massive increase in, stores and shopping and those types of things. But it usually revolves around daily necessities, daily things that are used on a daily basis. Those are the things that really grow. You're exactly right. I mean, the quickest way to show that you have made money, the quickest way to show that you're on the right side of the boom cycle is you go somewhere else and you come back and tell people where you went. And so those high-end items generally do not come in because they know the oil industry, if that's what the boom is built on, it is a boom and bust cycle. Historically, always has been.
And a lot of times they when they do come in, it's on like a traveling show. They'll come out in a parking lot, they'll have a tent, and it's all, sometimes legit. Sometimes those prime rib shavings aren't, but a lot of times when they come in with some of the different things, it's for that reason because they understand, hey, you know what? There's not really a high-end XYZ in Midland. If we come in for a weekend, we'll satisfy those people that don't want to leave because they can't. They're tied down, but they want to have it now. So that was the other part I had on that was the diamonds are in Dallas, and I was glad they put that storyline in there because that is extremely true, and that is very much oil field related. So as this show is trying to discuss as many real life oil field storylines as possible, which is becoming increasingly more tough this season, less risk, less money. That part wasn't too subtle. And then Cooper and Ariana we have, and I'm about lost on that storyline, man. Until Cooper comes back on the oil field, I don't know what to do on that one.
Yeah. I think that's just a human interest story at this point. But it was interesting again establishing Cooper as a stand-up man that's going to do everything right to the point that he has to go to his girlfriend's son's great grandmother and look her in the eye. So Ariana's dead husband's grandma and look her in the eye. And when he looks her in the eye, so she can evaluate whether he's acceptable or not to take care of, to marry her and take care of her great grandson. And so I think that, all that was a human interest story just to show that, once again, Cooper is the model citizen.
And I do think it is going to pay off. I think this is a little bit of the slow grind, the long format storyteller, because remember, Cooper, he's the only one on the whole show that has experience working in the oil and gas industry. He's actually worked on a crew before. He did when he was younger, and so, or he came from the business. He came from, I think, Arkansas is where he came from, but he does have ties to the industry. And so I think what's going to end up happening is that probably season 3, I would imagine, he's going to be on the rig almost the whole time, and that's when it's going to kind of take off. That would be my guess because of way that they're probably going. He'll probably end up on the offshore one too. Maybe not, I don't know. He's got his own stuff going on, but either way,
Well,
go ahead.
I'll make a prediction on Cooper. I'll make a prediction. They have worked so hard to show that he is the perfect person, as far as when it comes to Ariana. He's obviously not very smart when it comes to business, but he is the perfect person when it comes to relationships and Ariana and taking care of everything, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. Inevitably, in any show where that happens, that's the guy that's going to screw up. That's the guy that's going to do something that is just completely unexpected. And so I expect that coming, if not, probably not this season, but season 3.
And probably the most undersold line of the show, which I think probably was lost on about 90% of the people, was when Cooper called Angela to get the ring or for ring advice, and she gave him the ring that Billy Bob Thornton had given Angela. And Angela's explanation to Billy Bob was that that ring had stank on it, of failure. So she gives it to her son. Just fantastic story, character evolution to just let you know the way her mind thinks, because she thinks she did something good there, but then her explanation was just one of the most awful things you could possibly do to your kid. Did you catch that, Warren?
I absolutely did. Anyone that's in a part of a large family, which I'm a part of a large family on multiple sides, there's always that family member that volunteers to help everybody else out, but somehow it always benefits them more than the person that they're helping out. And that's Angela. Is she thinks she's doing something great, but that was her excuse to go shopping. That was her excuse to upgrade. And so I laughed at that one because I'm like, oh yeah, you look at different families around, you can always find that member in a family that somehow they always work it to their benefit when they're helping other people out.
And they're just so oblivious to it. They're just so, I mean, it's just fantastic. But, well, that's about all I got. Less risk, less money. That part was not too subtle in terms of the cartel actually being in the oil business for the last 20 years. Diamonds are in Dallas, and the future is the path of coal. That was my main oil and gas takeaways. And your final thoughts, Warren?
My final thoughts are, they really need to bring Cooper back into this a whole lot more. I don't really care what he does. He can just walk into every scene wearing his Texas Tech hat, because I got my Texas Tech diploma right back here hanging on the wall. And the Red Raiders are headed towards playing for the national championship, I believe. So, that's definitely what's making this show a huge success this year, is that Texas Tech hat.
I'll tell you what, any one of you DraftKings, if you want to go ahead and sponsor Warren and I to do picks, we'll certainly do picks as well when it comes to the games. Let's give them a sample here, Warren. Do you are you who are they playing, first of all? I haven't even checked. I saw that Oregon beat James Madison in a pretty decisive first half, and then Tulane forgot to show up, and then whoever they played just trounced them. And Miami defeated Texas A&M? Oklahoma. Oklahoma. Okay.
Oh, wait, no. Miami defeated Texas A&M, and
Alabama beat Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So who is Texas Tech playing? I haven't looked at the next seeds yet. I just
Now,
saw who won.
we play Oregon first game on January 1st.
So Oregon is known to have a pretty good offense and above average defense. What's Texas Tech known for?
You probably couldn't find two more similar teams.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, in college football, they are very similar teams. It is going to go one of two ways. Both of them are strong on defense. Both of them have high-powered offenses. It's either going to be a shootout or it's going to be a slugfest and a very low-scoring game, depending on where their matchup is better. Is it a defensive matchup or is it an offensive matchup?
I'll even go a step further. I think it's going to be a slugfest, but defensive and offensive. You'll have each team scoring a defensive touchdown, and that will make it probably each one in the 40s, maybe the 30s. For some reason, these teams end up in double, triple overtimes all the time too. For some odd reason, it's just remarkable. But I'd go with Texas Tech on this. I think I don't know what the spread is. I've just seen them play a few times this year. They looked impressive. Oregon does too, but man, the Big Ten grew up. Big Ten grew up in a way that the SEC wished they would have. And overnight, it just happened to where the Big Ten became the powerhouse. So it's hard to say with Oregon. They're out of the Pac-10, which was kind of, on the way down. And anyway, you got a prediction? I got Texas Tech, let's say 45-42.
Okay. Texas Tech, besides the one game that we lost where we didn't even show up, we beat every team this season by 17 points or more. And so I think that we're going to hold the tradition. I think that we're going to win by 17 or more. And so I'm going to pick Texas Tech. Let's go Texas Tech 31 and Oregon 14.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen, an oil and gas interview that had little to do with the oil and gas industry, but we tied it in our own ways because Texas Tech is one of the bigger research universities in the oil and gas industry. And let's see, Landman, episode 7 is next. Episode 7. We'll be back next week. Let's see, when's Christmas, by the way? Oh, it's in 3 days. So, yeah, it's okay. It's not on Christmas Day. But, ladies and gentlemen, we got a discount link down in the bio. And happy Christmas, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, Warren.
Merry Christmas to you and all the listeners out there.